Hello everybody and welcome to another video. In this video, I basically want to introduce and keep talking about parameters in general. So last time we talked about how parameters are the idea of taking a value from one source and passing it to a method, and it allows us to be able to simplify a program. So let me go ahead and delete all this because that was just our mini quiz from last time. And let me go ahead and work off of this method right here. Let me go ahead and delete all these extra spaces right here. Let me go ahead and comment out this. Uh, and let me go ahead and compile this. And so we talked about the idea that if I want to actually call this method, I actually have to give it the type. So here I could call it look, and then I could call it 12. Again, I have to match the exact definition of the method that I want to call. So I have to pass in a string and I have to pass in 12. Again, order here matters. So for example, I can't do something like this, which is what I want to talk about here. I can't do 12 and then I can't do look. I can't just pass in 12 and look because now that's not the mistake I wanted. I wanted a comma here. I want a different error. That's not the error that I wanted. That was just typing error. But here's what it's saying. It's saying incompatible type. Int cannot be converted to a string. So let's go ahead and walk through what this method is doing. So in the main method is what, again, like we talked about for like last couple of videos now, like for a while now. The main method is what's being called whenever you click run. And so what's inside the main method? Inside the main method, we are calling a method called parameters. And the method parameters has a method called parameters, which takes in parameters. And it takes in a string name and an int x. So we have to actually have a string, comma, we have to have an int. So we need to actually separate the values so that when we call it, it has to be a string followed by an int. So let's see what we're doing here. We're passing 12 to the first argument, which is a string. And so what is 12? 12 is an int. But what's the first thing that this method accepts? It accepts a string. And what are we passing to it? What value are we passing to it? We're passing in a 12. So this is basically saying, like, think of it like this. We're saying string name equals 12. And what is that? That's a possible lossy conversion from a int to a string. So in this case, the compiler is even telling us that, hey, you are taking the value of 12 and you are turning it to a string because you are calling a method called parameters, and the first argument that the parameters takes in is a string, but here you are passing in a value of 12, which is an int. So the program is going like, hey, you're doing something wrong. And that's because if you guys were watching this video, that's because I flipped the order. And again, order matters here. So if I actually want 12, I can actually put it as a string to fix that error. But let's see what else happens now. If I actually do this, this will not actually take care of the problem, but this will actually solve part of the problem. Now we have another issue. Now here we fix this problem. 12 is a string, here string. But what is here? Look. Look is what? Look is a string. And what's the second argument that we're passing in? Again, the comma separates the arguments. So the first type is a string and the second type is a string. And what's the method here? The first type is a string. The second type is a what? It's an int. So we're passing look for an int. And so here the compiler is telling us you're taking a string and you're trying to convert it into an int, which doesn't work. So what we need to do is we need to actually pass in an int, which could be 31. Um, we could go ahead and run this. Again, there are multiple ways in which you could have fixed that. For example, you could have changed this to be a string and then made that a string, or you could make that an int, or you could just flip the order back and make sure the method header works. But basically, the whole idea in this video that I want to talk about is common mistakes that I see many people make is that whenever they call the method, whenever they call a method with parameters, they actually get the order wrong, or they basically give it incorrect type. So for example, if the method goes public static void cookies and it takes in an int, I actually have to match every type of variable there is, and the order matters here. So for example, I have to have 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12 if I actually want all ints. So for example, I had a method that looks like this: public static void. I called it like green, and I had an int x, int y, string b, string z, double me, string hello. Let's say I had a method that looked exactly like this. And if I actually want to call it, let me go ahead and delete this. If I actually want to call it, I actually have to call green. Like you call it here green. And the first thing it takes in is an int. So let's pass in an int 10. Pass in the next thing it takes in is it takes in an int y. So here, int y. The third thing it takes in a string b. So I need to pass in a string. Again, separate your arguments with a comma to tell the computer that this is the first argument, the second argument, and a string. So let's pass in a string. I'll call it b. And then here we have a string z. And then here we have a double me. So I need to pass in a double. I could call it 3.14. And then here it takes in string hello. So I can pass in hello. We go ahead and compile this, and it works. So basically, the whole idea that I want you guys to see is whenever I have parameters, I actually have, whenever I call it and whenever I actually define their values, I actually have to give it specified in the order that the method is specified. So for example, if the first thing the method has is string followed by an int, the thing when I call it, whenever I call the method, I need to actually pass in the string and an int. Again, order matters here. And you can also do this. You could also do is you could say int x equals 10, int y equals 20, and then string z equals look. So I can just pass in here. Whenever I see an int, I can pass in int x, int y, and then string. I can pass in here. I can pass in z if I wanted to. I can pass in z here. I can also pass in z here, and I can also run this. This will actually work. So that's just basically the idea of parameters. Again, it takes a little while to get used to, and once you really start working with it, you'll like really see the whole idea of parameters. I hope this video helped clear up some misconceptions and common questions that you guys have. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.